Tim Goldstein, autistic adult, and your host for Life in a Neurotypical Universe, where we take a look at life from the perspective of an autistic adult. Tell us something about you.
I kind of know myself as Mel. Everybody calls me Mel, even though my name is Melinda.
Okay.
And I've recently started up Planet Neurodivergent in an effort to help neurodivergent people everywhere. Basically, I grew up with ADHD combined type. So I have inattentive ADHD and hyperactive impulsive ADHD, which you will definitely realize as you talk to me, because I just impulsively jump in with whatever I think is going on in my brain without really considering how I should speak to the other person first.
You mean you're supposed to consider how to speak to the other person first?
Apparently.
Huh.
Your brain's supposed to slow down for long enough.
I don't think I've ever done that.
Haven't you? You don't have ADHD, do you? You just
just autism. Well, okay. A few other things besides, but ADHD isn't one of the ones besides of the comorbidities.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many overlaps with the two conditions. It's so hard to differentiate between them. Like, it really is. Like, honestly, I spend my entire life trying to differentiate between conditions, and those two particularly. And even scholars can't do it. Like, it's quite hard. Yeah, so basically I grew up with dyspraxia as well. So I was okay at school.
Okay, explain that one to me.
Dyspraxia?
Yeah.
So dyspraxia is when you are uncoordinated, basically, like significantly uncoordinated, like, you know,
like always picked last on the gym team, and nobody wants to play, anything that involves any type of sport on the playground with you.
Yes.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, shocking. Like, I couldn't catch a ball very well, which is frustrating because I had a teacher who was obsessed with softball. And
that's funny. I had the same problem. It wasn't until I turned about 30 that I was suddenly able to catch a ball.
Same, exactly the same. And so your brain grows out of it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, about 30, I could suddenly start tracking this thing moving through the air and grab it right out of the air, and it was no big deal. Before that, it was smack into my face, and that was the end of it.
Yeah, that is so interesting. And like, there's many people who think like a lot of elements from dyspraxia are actually within the autism spectrum. So whether you have it as part of one condition or whether you meet the diagnostic criteria to actually have dyspraxia, it's hard to know. And it's also hard to think retrospectively. Like, we can't really go back to exactly, we can only think back. And in that, science shows us that is never accurate.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So
except we know how many times we got hit by a ball. I mean, that we do remember pretty well.
Yes, and shocking hand-eye coordination and all of that sort of stuff. But it's so weird because now I'm actually brilliant at ball sports. It's great. I love it. And, things like riding a bike was difficult for me when I was young. Like, I had no balance, couldn't climb a tree, all that sort of thing. And that's bad in Australia because we live in an outdoor culture here and, everyone's really sporty. But now, yeah, I love all sports. Like, I play tennis and quite coordinated, which is fantastic. Just as I'm about to go.
Would you say that some of the challenge that you had in doing sport type things, we'll say better coordination in active movement type stuff? One of the things that's fairly common in autism is where you have essentially lack of sense of your body position, of just knowing where pieces of your body are at any given time.
Yeah.
Which then, of course, makes us relatively uncoordinated because if you don't know where you're starting to move your hand from, it's hard to figure out how to get it to where you want it to go.
Yeah, exactly. Your proprioception is all out. Your interoception is all out, so you don't really feel things within you the same as you're supposed to.
Right, and you just hit a key word where I was going with this one, which was feel, which is an interesting thing because there's a gentleman, Dr. Robert Skayer, and he used to be a trauma doctor, but he has some interesting ideas and philosophies on some other things. And one of the things he said in a book of his I was reading was that emotional traumas are stored in the body as sensations.
Oh, right.
Now, if you just take that one step further, which, being a little neurodiverse here or a lot neurodiverse, I, usually always take it a few steps further. And if you think about it, it's just not the traumatic emotions that are stored in the body. This is how funny it is. I went to my wife. We've been married. It's going to be 35 years next month. And this is only like a couple months ago. And I said to her, honey, are those like body sensations I feel? Is that what you would call an emotion?
Oh, right. Okay.
And I was 100%, I mean, I wasn't joking with her. I was being 100% honest because I do have difficulty processing emotion. And what if that lack of sense of body feel and body sensation is part of why we can't feel emotion? Because what are emotions? They're feelings. And I never understood that when they said feelings. It's like, I mean, it's all in my head. There's no feel what.
You see, I have the opposite problem in the feelings department. Having ADHD, like I feel way too much, 99% of the day I'm just constantly feeling. However, I still cannot feel sensations in my body. And I've done a lot of meditation courses and, acceptance commitment therapy, where you're supposed to like feel what's going on and mindfulness and everything. And I literally cannot feel anything in my body. But I can still have feelings, like far too many feelings. So for me, it's separate, the brain and the body feeling.
Well, I would agree there's separate types of feelings very much. I mean, the way I explained it to my wife when she asked me, how do I know I love her? This was all after I was diagnosed, and I didn't know. It was about 5 years ago. And I told her it's a logical mental thing. I know that I love you in my brain, and I know that I would do anything for you. Mm-hmm. It's not a feely thing. It's a logical mental, commitment. And so to me, it's an illogical emotion. It's not a feel emotion.
Yeah, you can't really explain love though, you know what I mean? Like you can't logically explain it. Well, I don't think you can. I know scholars try to, and I've read about that, but you can't really think logically about things like that. It's just something It's not something you feel per se, like actually.
Well, I don't know. All these people, these neurotypicals tell me they feel it. I don't know. Maybe they're on drugs. I don't know.
Probably. Well, maybe they're just saying the word feel to describe, they're not actually feeling it. Like
no, they're actually honestly feeling this stuff.
You have these conversations with them?
Oh, yeah. I've dug into this one pretty deep because for me, quote, feelings or emotions aren't feels. They're mental things. If I'm feeling, if I'm being empathetic towards something, it's because there's an emotional, logical reason why I connect with that group, whether it's the protesters in Hong Kong or whatever. I mean, there's some logical reason you go, I can feel for them of what they're trying to do. But it's not a feeling, it's a mental connection to them.
Yeah, do you know what? I've never thought of this before. I'm going to think about it all the time now. But I think I'm the same. Like I definitely tend to apply logic to that as well. Like you see, I went to see the Joker movie a couple of weeks ago and, I just instantly, because I'm an empath, so I instantly went into his body and I knew what it was like to be the Joker. Like I could feel it, but I couldn't feel it if you talk about it the way you're talking about it. But I just knew what it would be like, logically, I guess, what it would be like to be so downtrodden in society as he is with his schizophrenia. So I don't know. I'd never really thought about the actual word feel, but
well, there's a reason that in most languages it's called feelings. I'm pretty convinced that it does go back to body sensations somewhere along the way, and those body sensations, mind you. But I'm convinced there's something about them that I should be understanding.
Same. And I think that's sometimes why a lot of us overeat and everything as well, because we can't really feel when we're full or anything like that. Well,
right. So we let our logical or at times illogical brain drive us because, we're depressed. So we just go eat food, even though you don't feel that it's not really feeling too good at this point.
You could look at it that way, but you could also look at it from a neuroscience perspective. And I mean, it's more to do with like chemical messengers in the brain not working and things like that. But I guess that's all connected with the central nervous system, like it goes up and down your spine and it connects your nerves, so your feelings. So I guess that's why we don't really feel things, like if our neurotransmitters are working differently to neurotypicals.
That's kind of my guess is, we interpret in a different manner. I mean, really, when we come down to it, what's the whole definition of being on the neurodiverse side versus the neurotypical side? essentially we process and perceive the world differently than they do. That's about it,
true.
really. I mean, it's just that we perceive it, we process it in a different manner than a neurotypical does. Now, there could be a whole variety of different manners. I mean, obviously, yours with ADHD is a little different than mine with primarily autism, but we both definitely think and act a little differently than what we would consider a neurotypical type individual.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, it's not just conditions like ADHD and autism, you know, and dyslexia, where people typically tend to think that it's the neurodevelopmental conditions like that you're born with and you're raised with that are neurodivergent conditions. But it's everything like depression, anxiety, you know, bipolar, borderline, all of those people think and process information differently. Like they may take on too many feelings or not enough feelings at different times or whatever. So they're all part of this whole, you know, neurodivergent spectrum, I guess you could call it.
You know, the one that I kind of wonder about, I mean, I don't disagree with you when you take somebody who long-term bipolar is a, you know, chronic issue for them, or depression, or any of the other kind of things you mentioned. But what about when it's transient? I mean, we all know that the statistics say that basically, I can't remember the exact numbers, it's something like about 75 or 80% of us are going to have at some point in our life a major depression. I mean, it's just, that's what the statistics are. In some countries, we do something about it. In some countries, we just tough it out. But that still doesn't mean that the majority of people don't at some point have that. Now, I don't think that makes them suddenly become neurodiverse. I think that's just it's like getting a cold. They have a condition that's affecting them for a short term, but it doesn't change who they are. That's my thought, at least.
But it does change who they are temporarily. I mean, if it is temporarily, I mean, it's very rare that a condition like actual clinical depression will just clear up on its own without some sort of modification, whether that modification be, you know, changing what you eat or exercise or drugs, you know.
Well, I guess when I'm saying, you know, a lot of people will hit depression is they're not going into depression from what would you say, a biochemical, you know, neurotransmitter kind of thing. It was maybe situational. You know, they had a spouse that died and they go into there's no way you can call it anything but a depression. It acts at everything like the way that somebody who is chronic, but it was driven not by a brain abnormality or imbalance. It was driven more a different way of whooping the brain. It was driven by a situational that made them essentially broke so many of the routines they don't know what to do at that point.
But situational depression actually is a change in the brain. So it's your environment influencing your brain. So it influences, I mean, if you think about it, we have 100 billion brain cells, you know, and it's dynamic. It changes all the time. It changes for, you know, all of these conditions. So, you know, if a person has like a spouse death or whatever, then it changes the brain. Like brain cells actually die, you know, they overfire and they die off. And so you are talking about changed brain areas and you are talking about different neurotransmitter problems. And it usually doesn't clear up without some sort of intervention. And it's the same with like ADHD, for instance. You can intervene and you can change things, you know, you can meditate or you can, you know, take drugs. And even with a lot of aspects of autism, like some people have aggression and mood changes and everything, you can change those as well. So everything is modifiable. Everything is an interplay between our genes and our environment. You know, it's that whole epigenetics thing. Whether the genetics were altered in our ancestors or whether there were alterations in the womb that changed neural development, or whether then there's alterations from our environment at some stage in our lives from what we eat or traumatic experiences we face, it's all changing our brain. It's all dynamic. It's all constant. So this whole sort of black and white, this is what we are at birth. We were born with that. We don't change. Whereas with conditions like depression, you know, it can change, all that sort of thing. It's really not. Like things do change. Like our brain, it's not possible for our brain to just stay exactly the same and not modify as we go through life from our environment.
You know, which brings me to the thought, which has nothing to do with anything, but it makes me think, how is it as humans that we keep waking up every day and we think of ourselves as being the same human with the same continuous experience, even though we continually change throughout it? I know it's one of those questions for the philosophers that we've been asking for, you know, thousands of years, but it's interesting when you do point that out of how much as a human, the cellular portion actually changes as you go along. But the
Absolutely.
experience as a human is things essentially don't change very often.
No, I know. Yeah, I mean, cellularly, I mean, I'm obviously not a biologist, but we're meant to change our cells every 7 years or something, aren't we? Like,
Well, it all depends
so,
upon which cells, and I think it's skin cells are 45 days. I have psoriasis, so that's why I happen to know that one.
oh, okay.
It's different cells, different times. Stomach cells are incredibly fast. If I remember from things I've read, it's like under weeks, it's days. But then again, you think of the environment they're in. They're sitting in an acid environment continually.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I mean, if our stomach is supposed to influence our brain as much as, they're saying it does now, science is saying, then if that's changing that rapidly and we can change it with what we eat, then, some things even in autism can change when you take probiotics, for instance, or you eat prebiotic food, that sort of thing. So you're changing your brain. There is no set, this is the way we are and we don't change. And that's why, at Planet Neurodivergent, we basically just talk about all conditions being caused by genes and then altered with the environment, wherever that may be. And nothing is really the same. And I just find it, I personally get really frustrated with people who say my condition should be considered part of neurodiversity and that condition shouldn't be. That's more of a mental health condition. But, mental health, for instance, that's like a socially constructed.
Right, exactly. Why is it that because you are attracted to things that are moving around you more than some people, and I, with autism, happen to dive deeper and get stuck in whatever I'm on, maybe more than most people. Why is that considered mentally ill instead of being considered what it is, which is amazingly creativity and an amazing way to, I mean, if I was out, in the middle of the outback or the middle of the Amazon, I want you out front because you're looking everywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want you, sitting in the back, not paying attention. I want you right up front because you're
right.
not going to be just staring right ahead. You're going to be looking everywhere.
Yeah, we were probably way back in the cave days, like out hunter-gatherers and, doing all of our multitasking type thing.
Right.
It goes way back.
But again, it's the kind of thing that all these different traits, and I hate to refer to them as, to me, they're not disease or condition traits, they're human traits.
Correct.
Because we can find any human that will display it that we would all agree doesn't have the condition that you normally associate it with. Mm-hmm. And there's all these different, human traits, and we all display kind of different levels and ranges of them.
Yeah, well, that's right. And it can be the same even for conditions like, I know this is contentious what I'm about to say, but it can be the same for conditions like depression. I know people, obviously, I've suffered with depression quite horrendously in my life, and I personally don't enjoy it one bit. But I know people who get strength from their depression every day. You can look at it in a positive light in some ways, like it's made them more empathetic, made them more understanding of other people. I have a friend who plays in a band and they're quite successful, and he writes the lyrics, and the lyrics are just so depressing. But it's successful for him, and if he didn't have depression, then, the so-called mental health condition that has been labelled in our society as not being right. And people automatically think, well, I'm not supposed to be like this. So why is one condition acceptable and another condition is not acceptable? Shouldn't it be up to each individual person to just say, right, well, this is my neurotype right at this moment. This is what's going on with my brain, and I choose to either make a change with certain elements or not make a change.
Yeah, I think really, to me, you need to have a bar that basically says this person has gotten to a point where with whatever they have or do, that they're a danger to themselves or society.
Yeah,
we need to, as society, I don't know what you do in Australia, we have a tendency to throw you on the streets and let you deal for yourself. That seems to be the American way. Go talk to San Francisco. But, unfortunately, that is, what tends to happen is if people don't think like everybody, I wouldn't say everybody else. That's the wrong way to put it. If people don't think like the majority, you simply become the outcast.
Correct. Yeah. I do understand that, like, for instance, with conditions like bipolar, if a person's about to go and jump off a building, etc., and they may not recognize because they might be in a hypermanic state, obviously that person needs help, and we do need to have a
right. There's got to be some level where you say this person now they're becoming a danger to themselves or potentially society, one or the other. We now need to do something and take care of them.
Correct. But that's the same in every single condition. It's
Exactly.
not just in the mental health condition. It is the same in conditions like autism as well. And this is where I differ with people online, where they constantly like, yep, no, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, we're okay. But people with bipolar and depression, that's not okay. Well, it's not like that. There are some people with autism who are like bashing their head up against the walls and they can't, that's a real danger to
themselves,
their
yes.
And also to people who they look after, like they might be aggressive or something like that. So there has to be common sense about it, but it's in every single condition. It's not just in some conditions and not others. And like I just find it a little bit, I guess arrogant's a bit nasty to say, but some people are just a little bit like, well, hey, this is our condition and you can't say anything about it. But, we consider our condition to be part of this whole neurodiversity spectrum, but your condition is not. And I just think that there's just no empathy in that. It's just like saying, well, hey, I'm okay, but you're not okay.
Well, I think to me it creates a challenge. I don't know if you're somewhat familiar with my concept of the neurocloud.
Yeah.
And the neurocloud concept is to embrace everybody. When people are saying it's my condition but not your condition and all that thing, suddenly you now have this out group. You have neurotypicals, then you have these approved conditions for neurodiverse, and then you have a whole bunch of people that they just don't fit in the map anymore.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
seems ridiculous to me when we're trying to embrace everybody now.
Exactly. And it's another reason why the arguments about this whole neurodiversity is actually ridiculous. Like I was talking to Judy Singer, she's the Australian sociologist who created the neurodiversity.
Yeah, she and I have exchanged a couple messages, and I just love some of the sayings. The way she puts them in your lovely Australian phrasing it just cracks me up. It's just so funny.
I know, I love talking to her. I mean, she's
a kid. She's amazing.
In depth with her knowledge, but she sort of takes a similar line to what I do, in that we really need to be sensible about it and take like a middle range here. Like there are people, a lot of the criticism against the neurodiversity movement is against the people who sit on the fringes and who are hardliners, like there's nothing wrong with us, and you shouldn't say that there should be any change to our brains, that sort of thing. And then of course there's going to be people who are looking after people who are more affected, etc., who are going to oppose that. And it's creating this huge, I guess it's called the autism wars that people are waging into, but it's very political, neurodiversity. I didn't realize when I first got into it or how political it would be. I really honestly think that we just need to call for a bit of calm and just have a bit of common sense and take a middle ground to everything and realize that, there are positives and negatives of all of our conditions. And even within like neurotypicals, there are positives and negatives within their brains, and if they think they're all perfect and don't need help, then maybe they're not so neurotypical after all. Do you know what I mean?
Right. I mean, again, it becomes very situational. I mean, if you take again yourself with ADHD, and you take a neurotypical who doesn't have ADHD and put you in a dangerous situation where you don't know what direction it's going to come from.
Right.
My guess is you would be much better prepared for that situation just because of the way you are constantly paying attention to any movement, anything around you. Just pulls you in immediately. And,
right.
There's a situation where being, neurotypical would be a little bit of a detriment. So I think you're 100% right. It's not that neurotypical is better, or whenever I explain it in the neurocloud, neurotypical just as a group, the only reason we call it typical is if you put all humans in a bag and grabbed one, you'd probably get one. That's what most of them are.
Yeah.
But other than that, there's nothing special about them. It's another way to perceive and process as a human. And in some situations, it works really well. In other situations, it doesn't work so well.
Yeah, I honestly, I guess it's getting a bit philosophical, but I honestly even think the differentiation between neurotypical and neurodivergent is a little bit black and white. Everybody's got some unique idiosyncrasies, and they may not add up to diagnostic criteria, so they may not actually be diagnosed with that.
It's so funny. That's exactly the kind of thing that I say also. And again, that's the nice thing about the neurocloud model is you can have some of your perception, your being in the neurotypical area and such, but you can have some traits that are outside the neurotypical area too. And that doesn't necessarily make you neurodiverse or neurotypical. It would be really
Yeah.
what's more dominant at that point.
Yeah.
But you certainly can display both. You might be the neurotypical that we point to and say, you prove that it's not an autism or an ADHD trait because we all agree you're typical, but you show it.
Yeah. And I mean, you can have like a real problems in one specific area. Like I don't meet the core diagnostic criteria for autism, but like most people on the ADHD spectrum, I like to call it, we have more autistic traits than neurotypicals. Like this has been shown in several studies, and I find it's absolutely fascinating.
Well, we all know that they're kind of, if they're not, family, sisters and brothers, we know they're all cousins and related to each other quite closely.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, I don't, like I have problems with theory of mind sometimes. And I mean, that's only really on the autistic spectrum, but I'm not on that. But I have real problems with that. And that's plagued me over my life. Like I'll be in some sort of hyper focus chatting away to someone, and then I'll have not realized that I said completely the wrong thing and it's upset the other person. And that can be really quite damaging in a person's life and frustrating. But I don't meet the diagnostic criteria, so I don't get any help. And there could be people, even neurotypicals, that experience these traits.
I think when we're talking about autism specifically, as opposed to some of the other conditions that nobody would argue about falling under neurodiverse, we won't worry about those ones where, everybody's arguing about it. But I don't, how would I put it? Again, all of these things overlap so much with each other. And I think with autism, because the way the definitions were come about, the way they reached them. When you think about it, it was all reached on children. I mean, we have either Asperger's version of it, or we have, Connor's version of it. I mean, it was one or the other. And now we've put them both together because we recognize there is those people who are more impacted, like a Connor's classic autism. But we also recognize there's people like, me and many others that could often pass as being just a neurotypical person without any obvious autism symptoms until it slips out and then we get in trouble. But but because all of those criteria were built around children and off children, when you read the diagnostic traits, I mean, come on, how many adults do you know that run around flapping their hands? But it's a diagnostic trait. Now, the funny part is
they've learned to,
I got smacked enough times, probably by 12 or something, of fidgeting my hands that I stopped doing it. You just don't do it after long enough. But the big problem to me is, though, it's based on the observations, which is how you have to do it with children, because you can't rationalize with a 3-year-old. I guess you can try, but have fun. It's not based on the way that we've set up the criteria for virtually all the other conditions, which were based off of adults, where you could actually talk and communicate with them and get more context around it than simply some observations. If they do this, they do this, they do this, then they have this. No, we sit down and we talk to you and we start understanding, how do you think about it? How do you react? Then we start deciding what you have. We don't just sit there and look at you and go, oh, you're real uptight and tense in that chair, so obviously you have. Yeah. But we do that with autism. It's crazy.
So are you talking about like the diagnostic criteria? Like you think that needs to change?
Yeah, but again, it's all written around children. When you go and read through it, there is nothing in there that's written at an adult level. It's all written around children's actions. Yeah,
but it's hard though, because I mean, as Hans Asperger said, like it's supposed to be before the age of 7, and anything that happens after the age of 7 can be an environmental change. But I mean, this was how long ago? 1930s or something.
Yeah. And but again, in the English countries, we didn't know about Asperger until 91 when it was translated into English in the UK. So, I went through most of my life having no clue that I had anything other than I knew Tim was a little different than most. But,
same,
when I went to school, I graduated in 77 from high school. Thank goodness they didn't diagnose me with autism, because back then they put you up and locked you away. Thank goodness I didn't get diagnosed.
I know.
But really, when you look at it, that's, the truth of it is it wasn't really till the 90s that we really started kind of getting our arms around how wide and diverse the condition could be. And then we still seem to somehow forget that autistic kids become autistic adults.
They do, but it's very difficult, like trying to diagnose people as an adult, because so many environmental changes can occur. And then technically it's not autism, because autism is meant to be diagnosed before the age of 12.
Well, again,
So,
I say though, you can't apply that diagnostic standard to anybody over 30 years old because that knowledge wasn't known when they were under the age of 12. So you have to take it from an adult.
right. That's the retrospective. That's the problem with all of the neurodevelopmental disorders. Like it's you're relying on retrospective report.
Right, but the funny part is with autism, there are definitely very dramatic traits that as an adult, which also in ADHD, there's definitely specific traits that tend to be associated with those conditions. And again, it is a spectrum, which means that you could have any combination of those traits. Not everybody's going to have every one in the same levels.
Yeah.
But I still think that you almost have to look at any of these developmental disorders as a two-phase kind of condition. There's the childhood phase, where we're trying to deal with certain things and get them through being a child and not, hurt themselves or somebody else. And then there's an adult phase, where it really comes down to thinking, and it's no longer about the traits. It's now about how you process and perceive.
Okay.
To me, I one very frequent autism trait would be black and white thinking. Well, I work in the tech industry. Guess what? We're stuffed full of black and white thinkers, and most of them are very, very, we'll say, neurodiverse leaning, because who knows which one of the things they fall in. But as you say, autism traits kind of dance around with a lot of them.
Yes,
maybe it's ADHD, maybe it's depression. Who knows what it is, but they certainly display a number of autism traits, whether it's enough to say, yes, that's the condition or not. Functionally, you got to treat them like they have autism. That's the bottom line, because they don't see the world. I'll put it this way. They see the world far more like I do than most management does.
Correct. But even within autism, there's so many different subtypes, which are only really coming to light now.
Right.
Like when I was listening to your podcasts, I was listening to you talking a lot about, you were saying like, oh, we all think like this, and, we tend to perceive things like this. And I have a lot of autistic friends. Like, it's another reason why I swear I'm on the spectrum, because just about everybody I know from way back in the day it would be on the spectrum or be very close to it. We just think differently and tend to bounce off each other more than other people. But I just find that they're all so different,
Oh, and I agree. There's a huge amount of differences. Obviously, when I'm talking, I'm kind of talking from the perspective of my own personal experience on it. Yeah. And my personal experience from, again, being in the tech industry so long, where it is very, very prevalent, is there is a generality that we tend to be this way. But of course, what I'm not including when I'm saying that is we also know that in autism, there tends to be a very artistic kind of expression of it, not just the technical kind of expression. And obviously, people who have the artistic expression tend to have some other traits that are different than the technical people, because a lot of technical people can't be artistic. But sometimes, well, you take an Einstein. He did both. He used to play music. He drew. He did those kind of things. But obviously brilliant as a scientist also.
There is a stereotypical Aspie out there, and it tends to be more of the technically driven one that people think about. And they're doing a lot of research now, which I find fascinating. Like a lot of it's coming out of the UK, where they're starting to narrow down these different subtypes, which is weird because obviously in the DSM, they're trying to put all the subtypes together and label it under all one label. But then they're doing a lot of research into trying to separate them apart again. And like one of my fascinations is seeing people's facial characteristics, and I'm starting to put people into different subtypes based on those facial characteristics, which is fascinating. And I'd absolutely love to run.
When you say facial characteristics, do you mean expression and such in their face, not static?
No, static. Yeah, like different noses and different.
So static facial can.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I know this is going to sound wildly arrogant, but I'm nearly always right. And like I'll sit there watching TV and I'll annoy people around me and I'll just say, oh, that person's got Asperger's, and they'll be that particular type. And then they'll start to behave and they'll look at me like, yeah, okay, Mum's right again.
So the only thing that I've ever heard with autism, and again tends be Asperger's, is head size wise, like hat size wise, tends to be larger. And I certainly do fit into a much larger size hat than would be considered the average. But I've never heard of any other particular
No, there
physical
are. Yeah,
tells other than that.
yeah. So yeah, there is the neuronal pruning issue. Like it doesn't prune off in the womb, and it doesn't. Your brain cells don't prune like neurotypicals prune as a teenager, but with autism, a lot of the time they don't, and that's why people remain so creative and everything, which is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, no, there is. They've run studies, but only on children, and it does show different autistic characteristics. They've only run, I think, one. Yeah, I think they've only run one, but it's basically on the nose and the mouth and the ears. But yeah, no, it's really interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. I would love to see more on that because, like I say, the only time I've ever heard anything, and of course the head size thing goes back. I think that was noted in probably both Asperger and Connor stuff going back. Gosh knows how far.
Definitely. No, absolutely. Like I can send you the study.
Oh, please. Yeah, I would love
but
to
it doesn't
see
go
it.
far enough. Like it doesn't delve further into it. Like I'm not going to talk about it now because I'm sure I'll annoy your listeners. Like they'll start to think, oh, gee, is that what's going on with my nose? But like I'll email it to you, and it's quite fascinating. Like different shaped noses, they behave differently, and it's because in the womb, your nose is and your mouth and like your jaw and everything is influenced by the hormones in your mother's womb.
Right, which is all, I mean, there's the Dutch hunger during Germany, which has proven that when the mother was starved, the babies in the womb totally different disease issues. And so, yeah, there's a tremendous body of proof showing that as you change the environmental conditions, what happens in the womb changes also.
Yeah, so if you're particularly high in testosterone, if your mother is particularly high in testosterone, that means you will be exposed to possibly too much of it in the womb, and it will change your facial characteristics to more male-leaning, bigger noses, sharper point, wider face, your ears stick out, that sort of thing. And if your facial characteristics change, your brain will be influenced as well. So it will also tend to be more dominated by testosterone. And there's a lot of studies out there that show that, women with too much testosterone, there's higher rates of autism born.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's
I hadn't heard that with the testosterone tie-in. Interesting.
Oh, really? Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah, I'll send you some studies.
Oh,
I have to remember to do
it is. There's so much work going on and so much research going on. It's just so hard to keep up with it.
Keep up with it. I know. I swear I could have gotten somewhere further in life if I didn't sit around reading research studies. Like it's just a sickness that I have. But another thing that fascinates me is birth order. Like I just can't turn that off either. Like everywhere I look, the more of the whole traditional Aspie type is usually born first in the family, and the more of the head scattered everywhere type, lacking theory of mind, almost comes across ADHD, tend to be born second. Yeah, and I can't turn that off. And I've sort of figured it out to be about 80% correct, or maybe even a little bit higher with everybody that I speak to. So I'd be interested to know if that resonated with your listeners.
For me, it doesn't. I have three brothers, and I am number 3 in line, so one younger than me, 2 older. Uh-huh. And now, a lot of this is based on things we're trying to remember and piece together because our father's passed a number of years back. Mom's still around. So, I've done a little trying to diagnose her. Mom's always been a problem our entire life. Never gets along with anybody. There's always some fight going on in the extended family somewhere, and we just never visited relatives because it was too much of a fight all the time. But no, my oldest brother, the more, I don't know, he's the only one that kind of stands out as being a little different. And he kind of almost, I think he probably is autism leaning, but he is more introverted. And I was actually, when I was up at Cornell to speak this past week, my brother lives in upstate New York. So I went and drove up to visit him. First time I've seen him in probably a decade. And so my youngest brother represents probably far more like I do. I mean, if you could probably switch the two of us, and other than he grew up and has been a farmer his entire life, and I've worked in the business world, so we talk a little different from just social backgrounds. Mm-hmm. He and I are very, very similar. My brother that's...
Sorry.
Oh, don't worry.
Keep going.
So then my brother that's one older than me, who's actually a medical doctor, an endocrinologist, and he's self-diagnosed as Tourette's, which, Tourette's may as well be autism with fix added in. That's about it. And then my oldest brother is the one that's kind of the odd one out because, again, introverted. And when I asked my youngest brother, we were up visiting, and my oldest brother has a tendency to go visit his family fairly often. They both live in the East Coast. And his wife was saying, my younger brother's wife was saying, whenever he comes up, he only sits in the chair and reads a book and pets the dog. And that's all he does for days. And I said, I bet you when Jeff, which is my youngest brother's name, if he comes in and I'm going to ask him about what's his memory of Dave, which is my oldest brother, childhood. So it just so happened Jeff came walking in about 10 minutes later from doing some things out in the farm. And I asked him. And he said verbatim, sitting in a chair, reading a book.
So that's the Aspie sort of stereotype, right?
Right. So he's got kind of the introverted Aspie stereotype, whereas the rest of the other three of us all definitely spectrum leaning or fully, but more the Aspie outgoing, you wouldn't know it type until all of a sudden we just say something that shocks the heck out of you, and to us was no big deal.
Okay. So, but he would be more reserved and quiet than the rest of you, do you think?
Oh, well, very much so. I mean, we'd be chatting or whatever, and he'd still be sitting in the chair just reading a book.
Yeah, so that just proves my point. So the firstborn in a family of people with autism and ADHD is the one who most fits that Aspie stereotype. And then depending on how much you're affected, you can tend to get a little bit more hyperactive or a little bit, more ADHD leaning as it goes down.
See, mine wasn't ADHD leaning. Mine is actually, fortunately, my form of bipolar is hypomania.
Oh, you've got bipolar as well.
Yeah. Well, it belongs there in the family with autism. Definitely. It's right up there with the comorbidities.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the form I have is, like I say, it's hypomania. So not full-blown mania. And the thing with hypomania is the tendency is to live on the switched on side, not on the depression side. The depression side only kicks in when you finally burn yourself out bad enough. And then a couple nights good rest and, you're back on the high side again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm exactly the same. Yep. And it's very common in autism, hypomania.
Yeah. And, it's one of those things that my psychiatrist I had to switch psychiatrists due to insurance, private insurance here in the U.S. And the new psychiatrist keeps questioning my dose of it's lithium that they use primarily to control the hypomania. Keeps questioning the dose I take because the dose I take is a 300 milligram tablet broken in half in the morning, half at night. That's not even considered what you'd start somebody on. It's such a low dose.
And that works for you? Like that helps you?
Yeah, what happened is I found when I went to 1.5 pills, so 450 milligrams, I went flat. I always stayed on the depression side and life just was. Right. So essentially, I like to keep myself medicated as far as that part. Just one step short of getting myself into hypomanic trouble, but I like the drive. I like the energy. It allows me to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah, that's the thing. Unfortunately with me, like if I get that hypomania, which I do pretty regularly, you can ask everybody I know, but I tend to crash down on the other side.
I mean, that happened to me when I went, again, this week. So I went back to, New York. I live in Colorado, so it's about a 4-hour plane trip each way. And then the day I was actually on the campus was all day with people, being shown around, talking to people, all day people. And then I got to drive another 2.5 hours to get to the town my brother lived in. Got there at the hotel late, went to sleep, woke up in the morning, visited my sister-in-law for a couple of hours, went up and visited my brother for a few more hours, got home and died. I was peopled out. I had enough people for days.
Too much stimulation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really that's exactly what it was. It was, when I finally got to somewhere quiet, it's like my head is buzzing. There's just too much. The brain chemicals just can't calm down. There's just too much of them flowing at that point.
That's right, because we have too many, I shouldn't say we, sorry, I should start again. People with autism have too many glutamate receptors, and that allows you to learn and take on information more, but the more that they fire, the more anxiety you can get, the more mania you can get, that sort of thing. So you can take medication to reduce them, most anti-anxiety medications and things like Lyrica or whatever, dampen it down with GABA. But, it doesn't change the situation in your brain for too long a time.
I'd say what happens to me, it tends to be that I'm in a situation where I'm enjoying it. I mean, I'm having a good time. I'm interacting with people that I really am having a great time interacting with. So you get into the spirit of it, I guess you would say. And you don't realize how badly you've actually drained yourself until suddenly it goes quiet and you're off and it's like, oh my God, this is like my head's buzzing, the whole world's buzzing. But while you're in the situation, you don't even notice it or recognize it. And
which is like a hyperfocus, basically, isn't it? So
it's like being on a drug that feels really good.
Yeah, I know. It's a great drug. I have the same issue with my therapist. You know, she's always like, "Oh no, it's not a good state to be in," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it really is when you're in that state. Like, it's fantastic." Yeah,
it is. Well, it's only not a good state because she isn't used to being in that state. It's actually a great state to be in if you want to be productive. I managed to have a full-time career and run a full-time manufacturing business at the same time. It's a great thing to have.
It is, I know. But I mean, your brain definitely does tend to crash down the other side, you know.
At times, yes, at times.
And I, unfortunately, also get really severe migraines, which are also interrelated. So if I go on any sort of, you know, hyperomania, I tend to come down with a migraine.
Oh, fortunately for me, I don't have that thing.
Yes, and it'll be related to the thalamus in the brain as well, like taking on too much sensory input, you know, too much light,
right?
Too much
everything.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, what comes up must come down.
Well, if somebody wants to reach out and contact you and find out more or volunteer or they just happen to have the whole pile of money, I mean, you know, maybe Bill Gates is listening. And, you know, Bill, if you're listening, you know, you were the richest man in the world again for a couple days, you know, when Amazon dipped. So how would they reach you if they, you know, want to send you a bunch of money or help you or write or do whatever?
Yeah. Okay, great. So just come to the website. So the website is www.planetnd.market. Yeah, just come in and there's like a contact form on there. You can contact us directly. There's lots of different ways you can contact us on there, or you can sign up to the marketplace and you can list your profile. And yeah, there's a few different ways you can contact us on there. So basically just go to the website and get in touch.
I will put the URL for the website right down in the show notes. So that when Bill's looking for this so that he can, you know, give you a Bill and Melinda Gates grant, he knows how to contact you quite quickly. We hope that you've enjoyed another episode of Life in a Neurotypical Universe. Please, if you enjoyed this, share it with your friends. Go take their phone and subscribe them. Heck, it will help us all out. If you want to know more about neurodiversity or have any questions for me, you can reach me at my website, timgoldstein.com, where I'll be more than glad to help you as best I can to navigate through the neurotypical universe.